Hey guys, so it seems like every channel now is filled with videos about AI, including this one. I'm not taking myself out of that. And it seems like everyone has forgotten about the people that actually need to learn how to code. Well, we got you back at Traversy Media. We're going to still be creating crash courses on popular technologies so that you can learn the fundamentals before you even touch AI. And in this crash course, we'll be learning how to create mobile applications with React Native. So you'll learn about its features, how to get set up, and we're going to build a real macro tracking app from scratch using Expo, which is a popular framework for building React Native applications. And I'm going to have all the resources in the description, including the diagrams that we use, the source code for the project, as well as an in-depth guide, all the steps to take to get to the finished product, including all the code samples. So you'll be able to follow along on your own machine. So if you're ready to learn React Native along with the Expo framework, then let's get started. All right, so we're going to start with a quick overview to understand what React Native is and how it works. And if you want to skip this part, you want to jump right into the project, that's fine. You can use the timestamps and get right into it. So the goal of this crash course is to learn the concepts quickly while building an actual project. And by the end, you should have a solid understanding of how React Native works, how the Expo framework works, and you should be well on your way to creating mobile apps with these modern tools. Now, this sheet here I'll have as a download in the description if you want it, but I just want to cover some basics. So what is React Native? How does it work? So React Native is essentially a framework for building native mobile applications using JavaScript and React, and it allows developers to create apps for iOS and Android using a single code base. Now, there are other kind of web technologies that will let you build mobile apps using JavaScript, HTML, CSS. But a lot of them are essentially just web apps running in a wrapper. So they don't have that kind of performance of a real native app, where React Native lets you build truly native mobile apps. Not to say that there's not a use case for some of these other technologies, but having the ability to build real native apps gives you a real advantage. Now, React Native's biggest advantage, and you kind of have a lot of different benefits from this one advantage, is having a single code base. So traditionally, if you were to build a mobile app, you have two major platforms to think about. That's Android and iOS. And traditionally, if you wanted it to run on Android, you would use a language like Java or Kotlin. And if you wanted iOS, you would use a language like Swift or Objective-C. Well, React Native lets you build for both using one single code base, and that's JavaScript, okay, which to me is an easier language to learn and use anyway. And then, of course, if you're already a web developer and you know React, then it's a no-brainer, really. So by having a single code base, you have a lot of other advantages. So, of course, cost-effective development. If you're paying someone to create a mobile app for you, you're not paying for two separate platforms, two separate projects. And if you're building it yourself, obviously, it's going to be easier to have one code base. Code reusability, because much of your application logic and UI can be shared across platforms. You have easy collaboration because one team can manage a shared code base, and they all have a common skill set, which in this case would be JavaScript and React. You have native-like performance because React Native renders with real native components rather than just web views. You have less maintenance because updates and bug fixes usually only need to be made once. And then complexity, obviously, you avoid managing two separate code bases, which makes it a lot less complex. So all of these advantages basically come from this one advantage of having a single code base. Now, I also want to get into how React Native works, and it's important to understand that the React framework that we use when we build web apps is no different than the one we use when we build mobile apps with React Native. React is just the core library, right? So it's responsible for the component model, state, hooks, all of that. It doesn't actually know anything about rendering to a screen on its own. Now, with a web app, we use an additional library called React DOM, and this will render HTML tags in the browser, right? So divs, paragraphs, etc. Well, when we use React Native, we use that instead of React DOM, and that will render UI components, native UI components such as view, text, pressable, and these will render to real iOS native components if it's being viewed on iOS, and real native Android views. All right, so just remember that it's the same exact core library. React is technically a library, even though everyone calls it a framework. Now, I do want to talk about how it works under the hood just a little bit. I mean, this stuff isn't really like super important to know when you're just getting started, but I think that I think it's a good idea just to have a general overview of how it works. So basically, you can kind of think of it as having two sides, right? We have the JavaScript side, which is your code, your source code that you write, your components, your state, your logic. It runs in the Hermes engine. That's the JavaScript engine that React Native uses with the new architecture, which I'll talk about in a second. And then you have your native side, which is the actual UI elements. These are real native platform components written in other languages like Swift and Kotlin. And it's important to know that you don't write or manage any of that native code, right? So you don't need to know any of that stuff. Now, I'll give you a very high level overview of how this works. And this is called the new architecture because prior to, I think it was 2025 or 2020, late 2024, React Native switched. It used to use a bridge to communicate with the native elements, and it would use JSON messages with that bridge. But now it actually uses something called JSI, or the JavaScript interface, and that's how React interacts with the native side, right? So on the React Native layer, on the native side, we have Fabric, which is the rendering engine. So this takes care of the actual rendering. And then for functionality, like dealing with the camera and, storage and things like that, we have something called Turbo modules. So that's the native API functionality. But yeah, so just know that JSI, the JavaScript interface, is how basically we communicate our JavaScript to the native side. And this is actually a C++ interface. Now, just to give you kind of a rundown of how it works, the process, React runs in the JavaScript runtime, right? So basically here. And then React Native processes and prepares for the native UI. JSI, the JavaScript interface, is used to cross that boundary, right, into native. And then Fabric handles the UI, and Turbo modules handles the APIs. So that's just a very, kind of messy, high-level overview. And again, it's not really that important for you to know right now. I just want to give you kind of a general idea. Now, when it comes to building React Native apps, there's two main approaches. You can use something called the React CLI, but that can be a bit time consuming and complex, especially for beginners. So what I use and what I suggest is Expo, which is a framework built on top of React Native that provides a set of tools and services that makes it much easier to build and deploy React Native applications. And it abstracts away a lot of the complexity of setting up a native development environment and provides a lot of features out of the box. You can almost think of Expo as like a Next.js for React Native. Now, as far as features and what it offers, so you have a complete development environment, and it's cross-platform. You can run or build for iOS, Android, even the web, because it comes bundled with React Native Web. Now, if you want to test on a simulator, an iOS or Android simulator, there are some other things you need to set up, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Then you have a rich set of APIs you can use. So for things like camera access, location services, push notifications, there's all kinds of Expo APIs for that. The Expo router is a file-based navigation system, and this works similar to how Next.js works, where you have a specific folder that you put files in if you want them to pertain to specific routes. And then there's also a client app called Expo Go that you can download on iOS or Android. And basically, when you run your application using Expo, it'll show you a QR code that you can scan, and it'll come up on your physical device through Expo Go. So it's a good way to test on a physical device. And then there's also a whole suite called Expo Application Services, and this allows you to basically build for iOS and Android in the cloud. So it makes everything just a lot easier. It even has cloud-based over-the-air updates, and also makes it easy to submit to the app stores as well. Now, when it comes to developing, testing, and building, there are some rules that you need to follow. So, for instance, if you're on Windows or Linux, you can't run an iOS simulator because in order to do that, you need to be on a Mac OS with Xcode. Okay, so if you want to use a virtual iPhone, the iOS simulator, you need to be on a Mac with Xcode. Now, for Android, you can run the Android emulator through Android Studio, whether you're on Mac, Windows, or Linux. Okay, so that's cross-platform. And then you can run your application in a browser because, like I said, Expo does include React Native Web. But if your application is using native APIs like the camera or I don't know, storage or GPS or something, then a lot of that's not gonna work within the browser. All right. So, and again, if you're using Expo, you can use EAS Build, which will build in the cloud for iOS and Android. You can also use Expo Go, which will allow you to kind of test on your physical device without having to do anything except scan a QR code. All right, so yeah, that's pretty much it. I just wanted to kind of go over some of this stuff to give you an idea of what React Native is and how it works. So now we're going to jump in and we're going to set up an application and build our macro zone app. All right, guys, so we're going to jump in and create our project. Now, for those of you that have watched my tutorials, you know that I like to build start to finish. I don't have highly edited videos where I just throw a bunch of stuff at you. I format them in a way where you can sit down and you can follow along. All right, so in the description, you'll have a link to this repo, which is called MacroZone, and it has the final code. But in addition to that, it has this steps MD file. And this is basically an outline of the entire video, the entire project with all the commands we're going to run, all the code samples, so you can copy and paste and follow along. You don't have to type everything out. I'll be copying and pasting some of this stuff, but I'll explain exactly what it does, so you won't be lost and you'll understand the code. So this is a screenshot of what we'll be building. It's called MacroZone, and it's basically a nutrition tracking application. It's made to track basically daily, where you add your calories or you add a meal with the calories, the protein, the carbs, and the fat. So you'll have tabs down here. You have add meal, which will be the form, and then all meals will list out all the meals. On the dashboard, obviously, you have your macros and you have your goal, and then recent meals at the bottom. And then towards the end, we're going to use some of the Expo APIs, like the share API. So this button here will allow you to share through other apps on the device. And then copy summary uses the Expo Clipboard API, where you can just click that and you'll get a nice, text formatted if you want to paste it in a text or in a text file or something. And then meal reminders will use push notifications. So it's a good project to start learning with and build, and it's useful. So let's go to the first one here. And the very first thing you should do is create an account at expo.dev, because that's going to allow you to use the Expo application services where you can build for iOS and Android in the cloud. It helps you deploy, it helps you submit to app stores. So all around, it's just a good way to manage all your React Native projects. It's completely free, so I'm not trying to sell you anything. So we're going to go to expo.dev, log in. I have a couple accounts. I'm going to use this Google account here, which is my demo account. And then up at the top right, there's a new project button. We're going to click that and just give it a name. I'm going to call it MacroZone. And then what it's going to do is give you these 4 commands here. So the first one is to install the EAS CLI, which is a command line tool basically to manage your Expo application services account and all your apps that you create within expo.dev. And you're installing it globally so you can access the EAS command from anywhere. And the next one is to create the project, and we're using create Expo app, NPX. And then in the MacroZone folder, or whatever you call it, we're going to run the EAS init command with this ID, not this one, but whatever is on your screen, obviously. And what that does is it'll connect your project to this project in Expo Dev, and then you can use the services. All right. And then in my sheet here, or in the steps, that's my first command as well, is to install the EAS CLI globally. So let's do that. I'm going to jump into my terminal, and I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to just add sudo in front of it. All right, and then while that's installing, I just want to take a look at the next command, which is create Expo app. That'll generate your React Native and Expo project. However, I'm using, or I want to use the latest SDK, which at this point is 55. So there is a flag that I want to add, which is at latest and then dash dash template default at SDK 55. And SDK 55 has some new features. It has uses the native tabs API, refresh design, new source folder structure. So that's the command I have here, right? So I'm going to copy that. And then let's jump back over here. And of course, you want to navigate to wherever you want to create this. I have a directory called code that I want to create this in. I'm going to paste that in and run it and just give it a name. So macro zone. And that'll generate a brand new React Native project with Expo and all its dependencies. Okay, so once that's done, we can cd into macro zone, and then this is where we want to add the init command. So I'm going to just grab that. Make sure you use your ID. And let's see, we're going to jump back over here and paste that in. Okay, so it says project successfully linked. So this project, MacroZone, on this machine is now connected to that expo.dev project that I just created. So now I'm just going to open up VS Code. Of course, you can use, whatever text editor or IDE that you want to use. And let's close the AI chat up. Right. And then we have all of our files and folders for our React Native application. Let's look at package.json real quick. And I just want to show you that we have React 19. Okay, this is the same React, whether you're building a spa or you're using Next.js or React Native, same library. And then it also includes, since we used Expo, it also includes React DOM and React Native Web. And what that allows us to do is actually create a web app with React Native. Now, if you're using native APIs like the camera and things like that, that's obviously not going to work in the browser, but just rendering your components and stuff, that will work fine in the browser. And then there's just some other Expo packages like the router, which is similar to the Next.js router. If you look in the source folder, there's an app folder, just like Next.js, and there's this index and explore. So basically these are two different routes, two different screens, which are just React components. But all this dummy data or this dummy content, we're going to wipe that away. There's actually a command to start fresh. And then there's also a layout in that app folder. All right, and then let's see. And then there's just some other things like the splash screen, if you want to change that little logo that's displayed, the status bar, some navigation packages. And then up here under scripts, we have the start script, which runs Expo start. Okay, that's what you're going to use. And when you run that, you can open in several different platforms. You can open on the web. You can open your project on an iOS simulator. If you're using a Mac with Xcode, you can open in Android if you have Android Studio. There'll be a QR code if you want to use Expo Go, which is an app you can download on your physical device. And then you can also run these separately, like npm run Android, iOS. Those will run the simulators, or web. So we're going to go ahead and run the start. So let's say npm start. All right, and you'll see that it actually shows a QR code, and you can scan this if you have Expo Go installed on your device. Now there is a caveat. So if we look at SDK 55, if you're using this, you can use Expo Go, let's see, on an Android device with SDK 55. If you're on iOS, you'll use the test flight. Okay, there's an app you can search for in the App Store called Test Flight. That's if you want to try it on your physical device before actually, building it out. However, what I'm going to do is just use my iOS simulator, right? So actually, let me show you the web version first. You can see it says web localhost 8081. If I open that up, then it gives me the web version. And you can see the home page, which is that index, and then the explore page. All right. So, and I'll just keep this open and we can periodically check check what it looks like in the browser. So like I said, I want to use my iOS simulator. So if I hit the question mark, it's going to show me a bunch of other things I can press here, like A will open Android in Android Studio. I will open the iOS simulator. W will open the web. I can reload with R, debugger, toggle menu. So I'm going to hit I, and I'm going to hit R just to reload, make sure that that's fresh. And there we go. So now it's showing in my iOS emulator. Again, you have to be on a Mac with Xcode installed. And notice I have tabs down here, Home and Explore, just like I do on the web version, but the web version looks a little different, right? It has a navigation bar at the top. That's because in your code, you can specify, I want to show, this component on the web. I want to show this component on mobile devices. And you can even choose if you want to show something on Android or iOS. And I'll show you that in a few minutes. Okay, so you'll probably see a gear icon here. So I'm just going to hit, I think it's Command D, opens the Dev Tools. Now I have this Tools button off. Yours is probably on by default, and you're going to see this. So that just opens the Dev Tools. And again, you can use Command D, so I like to just keep that off. And from here, you can reload. You can use the Source Code Explorer. You can actually go and see your code through the device. Toggle Performance Monitor. You have an element inspector like you do in a regular browser. Fast refresh. We're going to keep that on. But yeah, that's the Dev Tools. And I don't like to show the icon. Now, just to show you on Android, if I hit A, you do have to, and I do have Android Studio installed, but you have to open it up first. Okay, so if you're on Windows, you can use this as well as Mac or Linux. And actually, I wanted to show you this screen here. Okay, so if you have Android Studio installed, what you're going to do is go to More Actions and then Virtual Device Manager. And you want to create a new device with this plus sign. As you can see, I have a Pixel 9 Pro. So I'm going to go ahead and press play. It's going to open they call it an emulator. And I'm just going to reload this as well. And now I'm running it on Android, so I could use this to test if I wanted to. I prefer to use the iOS simulator, so I'm going to close it, but I did want to show you guys how to set that up. All right, cool. So let's see. I just want to make this a little smaller so we can see both. Okay, and then let's see. I think the next thing I want to do is reset the project, right? Because I don't want to have all this sample stuff here. So in the package.json, you can see there's a reset project script that we can run. So I'm going to just go ahead and stop this, and let's run npm run reset dash project. Okay, it's going to ask me if I want to move the existing files to a /example directory. So if you want to save it, I'm going to say no, because I just want to do away with it. All right, and then you'll see that a bunch of files just got removed. And if I come over to my simulator and refresh, let's see. Oh, I didn't. We got to run npm start again. Okay, and then I'll just hit I, and it should just open up on my simulator. All right, so this is what we'll see once we reset the project. It simply says edit the source app index.tsx file to edit this screen, which if we look in source app index.tsx, and let's see, I'll just take this text here and we'll just say my app, save that, and you can see that it auto refreshes, and we just have basically an empty project. Now I want to go over some of these components. So as you can see, we have this text and view, and that's what's being rendered in the JSX. Just like a regular React app, you have just a functional component. You have JSX, but instead of H1s and paragraphs and HTML tags, you have these native components coming from React Native. And if you go to reactnative.dev and then development and components, you can read more about these components and see all the ones that are available. So if we look at Vue, it says it's the most fundamental component for building a UI. So a Vue is just a container, right? And in that container, you can have flexbox, styling, some touch handling, accessibility controls. So basically, every page you create or every screen will be wrapped in a view, and then components within that will be wrapped in a view as well. Now, in addition to a regular view, you also have scroll view, because with a regular view, if you go out of the container, it basically gets cut off. With scroll view, you can actually scroll, with your finger and scroll down. Like for instance, if we look at our thumbnail here or a screenshot, on the all meals page, we'll have a bunch of these meals, and you might have 50 of them, and you don't want it to get cut off. You want to be able to scroll up and down, right? So in that case, you'd use a scroll view. So we'll probably use a scroll view on the home page and on the all meals, where the add meal will just be a simple form, so we won't need that. And then let's see, text is another one you're going to use a lot. And you can think of that kind of as like a div or a paragraph tag. Basically just you wrap text, right? So if we look at our project here, we just have my app wrapped in text. We don't want to just have my app with nothing around it. And let's see what else. So we have like modal, we have image. So if you want to show an image, there's an image component, there's a button component. There's a few things if you want to have buttons or pressable items. There's something called pressable, where you can actually have these different states like on press in, on press out, on long press. And there's also, touchable opacity, where if you click it, it just has that kind of mobile feel where it just fades out a little bit. But pressable is being used more these days. So let's see what else. Yeah, that's pretty much it for like the base components you're going to use. Now, I want to just go over, let's actually look at the steps real quick. So we've done all this stuff, live reloading, DevTools icon, checking the platform. So you might have times where you want to show certain things depending on the platform. So what I'm going to do is actually just copy this, number 9, and just replace this. Don't worry about the styling and stuff. We'll get to that. But if we go ahead and actually, yeah, we also want to bring in text and view. But let's save that, and then let's take a look here. I'm just going to refresh this. So it says, welcome to MacroZone, and then running on iOS. So this platform.os will tell you, what it's running. If I was in the Android emulator, it would say running on Android. So you can always check that. And I'll update this snippet to have the imports of text and view. I might have to change a couple of these things. Now you can also check the device information using the Expo device package. So if I were to copy this, and notice I changed the name of the function. It was index. What I'll usually do is call it whatever it is and then screen. If it's like an about page, I'd call it about screen. So let's paste this in now and take a look. And you can see running on iOS, so that's the platform OS. And then we have Simulator OS is the model name on the device. The device brand is Apple. The OS version is 26.3.1. Okay, so you can get all kinds of information about the specific device if you need to. Now, styling, let's talk about that real quick. So I'm going to jump back in here, and actually we'll just grab this. Okay, so let's refresh this. So as you can see, this is inline styling, right? And this should look familiar if you're familiar with React. So we have a style attribute here. We have it set to double curly braces since it's inline styling. And we just can add styles like flex, justify content, align items. If I wanted to do, like, let's say background color, set that to, let's say like red, then I get a red background. So you can do it this way, and basically it's just CSS, but instead of like background dash color, it's going to be camel case. So keep that in mind. Now, I don't typically use inline styling very much because it just gets messy. I mean, if you have, 20 different components and you're adding this kind of styling to all of them, it just gets really messy. So what you can do is you can use the style sheet API where we bring this in. Let's copy this one. Okay, so basically we bring in style sheet from React Native, and what we can do is create a variable, set that to stylesheet.create, right? So this create method, and then we can pass in an object with styles such as container, and these are just JavaScript objects. So container, we have flex, a background color, the padding, padding top, padding horizontal. Then we have a title style and a date style. And if we look up here, you can see instead of setting it to inline with double brackets, double curly braces, we just have styles, which is the name of the variable, dot container, title, and date. And then that pertains to those styles. So if we save that and then take a look, you can see now we have those styles implemented where we have that background color and so on. Now you're probably going to have styles that are repeated across pages. Like for instance, we'll have this container in other pages. You can have global styles, but I'll show you how to do that in a second. Right now, what I want to do is show you how to change this header right here, because you can see it just says index. So that's going to be in the layout. Now in the layout, we're importing stack, and that's part of the Expo router. So when you're looking at a mobile app, you can think of it as like a stack of cards, but it's a stack of screens. And whatever you want to show, that screen is going to go on top of the stack. And just to display it, all we have to do is return stack. And there's some options we can pass in here. Like if we want to change that header, we can say screen options, which is an object, and then we can do header title. Oops. Header title, and set that to whatever we want. I would probably set it to like the name of the app on the home page. Oops, what do I do here? There we go. Sorry, that had to be double curly braces. So header title macro zone, and now you can see that that shows macro zone at the top. Now you can also remove the header, and that's what I want to do on the home page. I do want to have a header on the inner pages because we can have a back button right here. But for the home page, I don't want to show it. So what I'm going to do is instead of header title, we can say header shown, and we can set that to false. And then that will completely get rid of it. Now for the global styles that I was talking about, what I'll usually do is in the source folder, I'll create a new folder called styles. And then in that, I'll have a file called global.ts. And that will be my global styling. And if we look at the guide here, the steps, number 15, I'm going to grab that and paste that in. So here we're bringing in the style sheet API just like we did within the index page. And then I also just am exporting an object of colors so that we can bring in colors to any component, any page we want, and we can do colors.background, and we can get this color here. That way, if we have to change something, if we have to change a color, we only do it in one place. And then down here, we're exporting our global styles, which, as you can see, just uses the style sheet create, just like we did in the page. And we have a container, title, section title, empty, and header. So these would be my global styles that I want. So I'll save that and then go back to my index page. And at the top here, let's import global styles. And since I have a container and a title in the global styles, I can get rid of it here, right? So we'll get rid of that. And then here, instead of styles, it's going to be global styles. And then here as well. Okay, so it's just not the date, because that isn't global. That's only in this component or this page. So I don't want it to be global. So I don't want, yeah. So we got global styles container, global styles title, and then styles date. And if we take a look, it should look the same. I'll go ahead and refresh, and it looks the same. But now, if we want to change the background color, for instance, since the container uses colors background, we could just change it here to, red, and then that's that. And anywhere that this is used, obviously it will change. So now we can close up global and layout. And what I want to do next is take this date here, which is just hard coded, and I want to create a home header component. So what we'll do is in source, we'll create a new folder called components, just like you would with a regular React app. And we'll create a file called home header.tsx. And then we can get that code here. And what is it? Number 16. I'm sorry. That's not it. 17. So home header with date. So I'm going to copy this and we'll go ahead and paste that in. We'll go over it. So very simple. We're bringing in colors, which is that object of colors from our global file. Actually, we should probably move this up top. And then also global styles. So we can do this. I don't know why I put two different lines there. Okay. And I'll fix that in your version. And then we're just getting the current date using toLocale date string. And then we're inserting it here. And we have some global styles dot header and we have styles dot date. Since this date style isn't being used anywhere else, I kept it in the component rather than putting it in the globals. All right, now we just need to bring that into the index so that we can use it. So let's import home header. And right here where we have the text and the date, we'll get rid of that and we'll add the home header. And then we can get rid of styles altogether because now this date style is within that home header component. So we don't need to bring in style sheet in the index page. So let's save that. Whoops, let's open up. Okay, so now it says Wednesday, April 8th, so it's no longer hard-coded. It's using that header component with the actual date. Now I want to start to talk about routing and screens because right now we just have this single index. And I talked about the stack, right? So we have a stack of screens, which right now only has one screen on the stack. So I want to create a new page here. Let's see, I just want to check this real quick. So we're going to create the meal list screen, which is going to be just app. So it's going to be in the app folder since it'll be a route screen, and it's going to be called meals tsx. So in app, let's create a file called meals.tsx. And then we're just going to grab this for now, which is simply a scroll view. Remember I said you want to have that, a scroll view if you want to be able to scroll. I also want to be able to scroll on the home page or home screen. So let's actually bring in scroll view here as well. And let's replace this with scroll view. Okay, now the meals page, very simple. We just have a scroll view using the global container, using the global title. It says all meals in the title, and that's all we have for now. So to make this a route, what we want to do is go to our layout, and instead of having just a self-closing stack tag here, we're gonna have an ending stack, and then in that we're gonna have a stack.screen with a name of index and a stack.screen with the name of meals. Okay, so you're gonna match this to the name of the file. So if I save that, it should still work. Now we don't have a way to actually get to the stack screen. So, or I'm sorry, the meal screen in the stack. So what we'll do is grab, let's see, so this is what I just showed you. And to navigate, ultimately we're going to have tabs. I'm going to show you how to create tabs at the bottom, but you can also just you can use this link from Expo Router. So what I'm going to do is copy this, number 21, and in the index page, I'm just going to paste that in. And if we go ahead and save that and we take a look, now there's this link. It says go to meals. If I click it, it brings me to the meals page, right? I have no way to get back unless I refresh, but that's how we can link to pages. We bring in link and then down here, pass it in with an href going to /meals. That should match whatever you have here, right? Which should match the file name. So that's basic routing. We just have some inline styles. I'm not going to keep this link. We just wanted to show you how to do that. Okay, and then we want to, in the meal screen, I want to have a way to get back. So I want to have a header with a back button. So I'm going to copy this, number 22, and we're going to go to layout. Okay, and just check out what's changed, which is right here. We're setting the header style to setting the background color and header tint color, right? So I'm no longer hiding it here. What I'm doing is hiding it on just the index page. Okay, so on individual stack screens, you can pass in options and header shown false for index, but for for the meals page, you can see I have options title meals. So you can do it at this level if you want to, hide the header for all screens, but you can also pass in individual options to customize the header on each page. So now, just refresh this, you see I have no header on the home page, but if I go to meals, now I have a header along with a back button. Now notice that the back button says index. You probably don't want it to say that. So what you can do is on the index stack.screen here, we can pass in addition to header shown and options, we can pass in title. And I don't want macro zone because that will be kind of weird. So let's just say home. So if we go ahead and save that and then refresh, go to meals, now the button says home. You could have it say back or whatever you want. Okay, so now that we've done that, there's one more page we need to add, and that's the add meal page, right? So what I want you guys to do, if you want, as a little challenge, is to create that screen on your own. Just basically replicate what we just did with the meals TSX and add an add-meals TSX, add it to the stack, and add the header navigation, and then just come back. So for us to do that, we're going to first create the file. So in the app folder, let's say add-meal.tsx. And then what I'll do is just copy, actually, I'll just grab it from our steps here. So the add meal screen number 23, we're going to grab that and paste that in. Okay, and then to add it to the stack and to our routes, what we're going to do is in the layout, we'll just basically, we can just copy this down and let's set that to the title is going to be add meal and the name is going to be add-meal. Okay, and then just to test it out, if we go back to our index and change the route here, instead of meals, let's say add meal, and we'll change the text as well, and then we'll try it out. Let's do a refresh here. I don't have to refresh with most of this, I just like to, but it says go to add meal, and now you can see we're on the add meal page. So that's how we can create routes and we can link to them using link, although that's really not what we're going to do in this because we want to have tabs. So back in our steps here, let's come down. We just did that. So now we're going to look at tabs, right? And the way that we can do this is to create a folder, right? We're going to create basically a group. So in the app folder, we're going to create a parentheses tabs folder because we don't want an actual route that goes /tabs. So the parentheses makes it just a group so we can group these files together, right? And then we're going to move all the 3 pages into that tabs folder. So let's do that now. So in app, create a new folder. It's going to be parentheses tabs. And then we're going to move all 3 files, not the layout, but all 3 files into tabs. I'm just going to close this up for now. And let's see. We'll just keep that as is for now. So now we have parentheses tabs with our 3 pages and then an underscore layout outside of the tabs. Now that's, if we check it out and we refresh, we still see the index page, right? But up here, you can see it's in the tabs folder. So we want to actually create a tab layout. So in the tabs folder, let's copy this. This is number 26, and it's going to have its own layout because we need to basically create these tabs in that layout. So in tabs, we're going to create a new file, underscore layout.tsx. Okay, so there's 2 underscore layouts now. There's one that sits in the app folder, and there's one that's inside the tabs folder. This is the one that's in the tabs folder. All right, so I'm going to paste this in, and we'll just go over it real quick. So we're just bringing in our global colors. We're bringing in tabs from Expo Router. Okay, that's where we're getting these tabs. And then some icons from Expo Vector icons. And then I called this function tab layout, right? The other one is our root layout. That's called root layout. So this is the tabs layout. And what we're returning here is a tabs tag, right? Just like we did with kind of like how the stack works, right? We have stack and then stack.screen. Here we have tabs and tabs.screen. And I'm just adding a couple options here to the parent tabs component, which is header shown false, tab bar style, where you can add certain styles. We add the background and the border color as the colors dot surface, the active tint color, the inactive tint color, right? So that'll just be the icon color, and text secondary. And then for each screen or each tab, we have this tabs.screen with the name. The name is going to pertain to the file name, and then a title. And then here we have tab bar icon, which takes in a function. And in that function, we can pass in the color and size and just set that to the icon's color and size. Okay, so we have our home, we have our add meal, and we have our meals. So that's the tabs layout. So we'll save that, right? And if I come back over here and I refresh, you can see down here, we now have these tabs. If I click add meal, it shows me the add meal page. If I click all meals, it shows me the all meals page. Now back in the steps here, we want to update the root layout. So in the root layout, instead of having multiple stack dot screens, we just have a single one that has a name of that folder, which is parentheses tabs. So back in the root layout, we can clear all this up and just add that, right? So we have no header shown on the stack, and we have one stack screen that's equal to that tabs folder. All right, so come back over here, and now we have same thing. It just shows this, but we don't have the header anymore because the stack isn't showing a header. And I don't want the header because we now have these tabs, right? We don't need a back button. So yeah, let's move on and let's start to create the rest of this app. So you should understand now how to create screens, how to navigate to different screens. So now we want to create the MacroCard component, which is there's 4 cards at the top with the calories, the protein, and all that. So what we're going to do is copy number 28, and we're going to create a new file in components called MacroCard. So let's do that. So components, new file, and macrocard.tsx. We'll paste this in, and then we'll take a quick look at it. So we're just simply bringing in our style sheet API, text, and view. Now, this is going to take in some props. We're using TypeScript, so we just have our props type here of MacroCard props. It's going to take in a label, a value, a goal, and a color, right? So the label would obviously be like protein. Value would be however many grams of protein you have with your meals combined. The goal will be whatever goal is set. So you'll have 1,200 out of 2,000. 2,000 would be the goal. And then the color, because each one has a different border color. And then we're passing those props in here. And then we're simply returning a view with some styles. Okay, and these are all local styles because this is the only place we're using them. So they're not global. And then we're just displaying text components with the label, value, and the goal. So very simple. Got some styles at the bottom. All right. So that's the macro card. Now we want to have a macro grid component for the cards to go in, right? So if I go back up and show you the screenshot real quick. So we just created each of these as a macro card, right? So there's 4 displayed here. The macro grid component is going to be the whole thing, which will contain all the cards. So back down to, I think it was 28, 29. So macro grid, I'm going to grab that. And I know some of you guys don't like copying and pasting, but it would literally make this video like 4 times as longer if I had to type everything out. And nowadays, I mean, once you learn the basics here, you're going to be using AI a lot. It's just how it is now. So it's not as important to type things out. It's just important to understand the concepts. So in components, let's say MacroGrid.tsx and paste that in. I'll go over this real quick. And I'm not pasting it in and just, saying see you later. I'm showing you exactly what's going on. So here we're just bringing in our style sheet API and the view component. We're bringing in the MacroCard component we just created. This component's going to render a view. with some local styles. And then we have 4 macro cards where right now we're just passing in hard-coded values, calories, value, goal, and color. Okay, so we're going to save that. And then the next thing we're going to do is add the macro grid to the home screen. So we can actually copy this whole thing here, although I didn't use scroll view, so I'll just have to replace that. And then go to index. So now it's in app tabs index. And let's go ahead and just replace this. And let's see, why isn't home header being found? Oh, that's another thing that needs to be changed. Now we're 2 levels deep, right? We're in app tabs. So this is going to be ... twice. And then I just want to make the view, and I'll change this in your version of the steps. So this is now going to be scroll view. Okay. So now that we've done that, we take a look and there we go. So we have each one of these is a macro card. The macro grid contains all of them. And obviously the macro grid is embedded in the home screen. All right, cool. So now that we've done that, we're going to move on to the meal item component, which is going to be, go back up here real quick. This is going to be each of these, right? So one of these is a meal item component. And we're on number, let me know if you guys like this format. So this allows, copying and pasting obviously allows me to do more in a video. And instead of you guys being confused on what's being pasted in, let me know if you like this format where I just literally lay out each number for you to use for the code. Let's see, where are we? Add macro grid to home screen, meal item component. So now we're going to copy this number 31, and in components, we're going to create a meal item folder. So components, let's say meal item.tsx, and we'll paste that in. Go over it real quick, although right now it's all just UI stuff, very simple. So we got our text view style sheet, we got our props, and we're just rendering a view with some text, okay? And we're showing each calories, protein, carbs, and we get some local styles. And this container is different than the global one, so that's why I'm not bringing the global container in. So we'll go ahead and save that, and then the next thing we want to do is the recent meals component. That's going to contain all the meal items. So let's grab that, and we're going to create components recent meals. Right, so components, new file, recentmeals.tsx, and then paste that in. So now we're bringing in the meal item that we just created, and we're just simply rendering a view. We have our section title, and then 3 hard-coded meal items where we're passing in these values. Okay, so let's save that. Now, we want to add the recent meals to the home screen. So we'll go ahead and grab that, go back to our index, and we'll just paste this in. So now it's showing not only the macro grid, but also recent meals. And if we take a look, there we go. Now, obviously, this is all hard-coded data. We're going to use something called async storage, which is like the device's local storage in a little bit. But right now, we're just kind of handling the UI side. Now, the next thing we should do is let's do the form, the add meal form. So I'm going to just close up this stuff for now. And let's go back to the document here and down to 34 where we add the meal form. I'm going to grab that. And then we're going to put that into our add meal page here. So we can go ahead and just replace that. And let's just check it out before we go over the code. And as you can see, we got a nice looking form here, meal name, calories, protein, carbs, fat. So we're just bringing in our usual text and view, but we're also bringing in text input, which obviously are these input fields, and also touchable opacity. Okay, there is a button component, but touchable opacity is more native like. As you can see, when I hit it, it has that kind of fades out. So that's what I use for the most part for like form submissions. And then we're bringing in use state as well, because this is going to be a controlled component where, we have a piece of state for every value, every input. So we have our name, calories, protein, carbs, and fat. And we have, of course, the function that's going to update those. So set calories, set protein, etc. All right. And this isn't really doing anything yet. There is a function here that's being submitted to, right? So if we look down here at touchable opacity, it has an on press that goes to handle add mail. And then handle add mail is just simply console logging the, excuse me, some of my eye, is just console logging the values. And then we just have a view with the container, we have the title, and then our text inputs. And our text inputs, just like with a regular React app, and I'm trusting that you guys already know React. I mean, there's not too many people I know that just jump to learning React Native without learning React first. So I'm not going to explain every little thing like what use state is and so on. I do have, a React crash course and plenty of videos and premium courses. So each input has an on-change text because it needs to update that piece of state when we type in here, right? When we put something in here. And then the value is obviously set to that piece of state as well. Let's see. And we just have an input style. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Very, very simple. So now that we have our form UI, let's go to number 35. Now we're going to start to work with storage because we need to actually store our meals. Right now, everything's hard coded. So we're going to use the async storage, this React Native async storage package. And this works pretty much identically to local storage in the browser. So let's copy that install. Oh, and another thing I want to mention is you can use npm install, but there's also npx expo install, which is what I would recommend because this is always going to give you the latest compatible version of whatever you're installing. So try to use that when you're dealing with Expo. So jump in here, and I'm just going to stop the server for a second. We'll paste this in and run it. Okay, so now that's installed. Let's run our server again. Okay, and we'll just check out our doc here. So basically, this says don't add to project. This is just how this works. So, and I guess I should probably make this a little bigger. I just want to show you guys exactly how this works. So to save data, it's just like local storage where a lot of times you're going to want to save JSON data, but obviously local storage and async storage can't store actual JSON. So what we do is take the value and run it through json.stringify, okay, which will turn it to a string. And then we just call async storage set item, just like we would local storage set item, pass in a key, okay, so whether that's, items or to-dos or whatever you want to call it, and then the value, right, which would be a stringified JSON object. And then to retrieve it, we simply get it with get item, just like with local storage, pass in the key, and then we just want to run it through json.parse to get it back into, I shouldn't say JSON, but a JavaScript object. Okay, so that's how it works. I just wanted to show you guys that before we actually do anything. Now, the way I would handle this is to create a storage handler where we have this separate file to simply call get meals and add meals or add meal. Not call it, but create it here, and then we can call it elsewhere. So let's copy this, and what we're going to do is create in the source folder a storage folder and a meals TS. Okay, so in source, we'll create a folder called storage, and then in storage, we'll create meals.ts, not TSX. This isn't a component where we're rendering JSX. It's just basically we're storing these functions. So we're bringing in async storage from the package we just installed. We have our meal type. So obviously, we're using TypeScript. And then I'm just putting the key into a variable here, basically a constant. and the key is going to be meals. But if I wanted to change that, I would just change it here. And then our get meals is going to return a promise that will be an array of meals, right? So basically, we're just doing what I just showed you, called async storage get item, pass in the meals key, and then we return the data. And if it's not there, then we return just an empty array. And then to add the meal, we're going to call get meals first, and then we're going to create the new meal with whatever's passed into this function, right? Because you can see meal is passed in. And then we want to set that to an object where we pass in the meal, we pass in the ID and create it at, because that doesn't actually get passed into the, into the function. That'll be created here with date.now.toString and then new date to isostring. Okay. And the ID, I'm just using, you could use like UUID or something like that, but I'm just using the date. And then we're going to await on set item. Okay. This is asynchronous. So we need to call await async storage set item, just like we call await async storage get item. Pass in the key, pass in the value, which is going to be json.stringify, and then pass in the meal and return the new meal. Okay. I'm sorry, I should say pass in the new meal along with the rest of the meals, because this stores all of them. And then we're just returning the new meal. All right, so we'll save that. And now we want to update the add meal form to use that storage handler, because right now it just simply console logs, which we didn't even test. So we can test that. And by the way, you can see that this is rendering in the browser as well. I have the web app open. And it will actually save it when this kicks in, the async storage, it'll work in the web app as local storage, which is pretty cool. But yeah, let's test this out real quick just to make sure that the form is hooked up. So I'll just say test calories 100, whatever, just add meal. And then if we look down here, let's see, we should see what is going on here. Let me reload this. Add meal. There we go. All right. So you can see it's logging calories, carbs, fat, name, and protein. Good. But now what we want to do is connect this form to async storage. So that's what this is, number 38. So let's grab 38 and let's go ahead and paste it in, and then I'll just go over it. Okay. So what we've done here is we're bringing in right here from React Native. We're also bringing in alert, because I want to show an alert once we submit it. I think that's the only new thing we brought in there. And we brought in add meal from our storage function, right? From storage meals. And what else? Also, we brought in router from Expo router because I want to redirect back to the home page once it's submitted. Our state, that's the same. The only thing that we really changed here is handle add meal. What it's going to do now is a little bit of validation. It's going to check for name and calories and show an alert, right? Because we brought in alert from React Native. And then we call that add meal, which is in the storage file, and just pass in all the values. Okay, the name, the calories, etc. And we're just casting it as number. Then we're just clearing everything out in the state. Then we set an alert, a success alert, and then we redirect using router.push. Okay, very similar to what you would do in just a regular web app. And that's really it. Nothing else down here has changed. All right, so now let's save that. Let's see. All right, so now if we come back over here, and I'm just going to refresh the app. And let's say add meal, and then we'll add an actual meal. Let's say like salmon salad. Calories, we'll say 450. Protein, let's say 55. Carbs, 10. And fat, 10. All right, so I'm going to click add meal, and you can see we got redirected, and it shows a success message. Now, it's obviously this is all still hard coded, but now that value is now in async storage. Let's add another one as well. So we'll say add, and then let's say protein shake calories. I think it's like 120. Protein, we'll say 25, carbs 10, fat 0, and we'll add that. So now we have two meals in our async storage. Now they're not going to show here yet, so that's what we're going to work on next. So let's jump back over here down to, let's see, 39. Let's see, 39. So we're going to get meals from local storage. So this is going to happen on the home screen. So I'm going to copy this, and then we're going to go back to, let's see, our index page, and I'm just going to replace this. Okay. So to just kind of explain what's going on here, we now have our state, right? Our meal state set in the home screen, which is going to be an array set to an empty array by default. Then we have a function called load meals, which is going to call get meals from storage, from our storage file. Okay. Then we're setting the meals. Okay. So we get it from async storage, and then we set the meals, which is the local state, right? This set meals here, passing in the data, just doing a console log. Okay. Now, let's see, down here, we have recent meals, which is now going to take in a prop of meals. And I'm going to get an error right now because this recent meals isn't prepared to take in a prop just yet. I don't think, right? Recent meals. Yeah, see, it doesn't take in anything, but we'll fix that in a second. Now this here, instead of using a regular use effect, right? Because we need a place to call load meals. And in regular React, you would just have a use effect and you would fire that load meals off. Here, we actually have to pass it into the to use callback, right? So we're also bringing that into or in from React. And if we don't do that, then what's going to happen is when we submit a meal, when we submit a meal and we go back to the home page, it won't show up. We'll have to refresh it. But doing it this way, using use callback, passing in the empty dependency array, then it should just refresh when we go back to the home page. So let's save that, and if I refresh that, nothing's going to change just yet because recent meals, we have to now pass that in. So I believe that's the next step. So update recent meals to use storage handler. So we have this, right, in our index. So now recent meals, we want to change to this code. So let's see, recent meals. Right now it doesn't take any props, but now we're going to paste this in. So this is going to have it take in a meals prop. Obviously, it's going to be a meal object. And then we're first going to just test to see if there are any meals. If the length is 0, it'll say no meals logged. Then here, else, if there are meals, we're going to just get the latest 5. So that's what the dot slice 05 is. We want the first 5. And then we're going to map through the meals and output a meal item for every meal, which will pass in each value. Okay, so let's save that. And let's go back here. And now you can see under recent meals, we have protein shake and we have salmon salad. So those are loaded in local storage. Okay, so hopefully this makes sense. We have our index page, right, where we have our meal state, and then we get the meals from async storage, and then we put it into this piece of state. Then we pass that state into recent meals as a prop, and then recent meals loads it. So the next step is to update the MacroGrid to calculate the totals. So we also want to pass meals into that. So meals in our index page is our single source of truth, right? We want to just pass that into these other components so that they update at the same time. So MacroGrid will also take in meals. But of course, we need to update MacroGrid to take that in. So if we go there, you can see that it doesn't take in any props currently. So now let's see, is this MacroGrid? Yeah, so right here, this is number 41. We're going to grab that. Hopefully the pasting, copying, pasting isn't like annoying too many of you. But again, for me to type all this out, it just takes way too long. Hopefully I'm explaining everything correctly, or hopefully it is correct, but hopefully you guys understand it. So now MacroGrid takes in meals just like RecentMeals does, and then we're just getting the totals. Okay, we're using the reduce high order array method, passing in the accumulator and the each meal, and then adding the calories, protein, carbs, and fat, and then returning that. Okay, and we start off. This is where we start at 0. Okay, and then we're just adding that to each value. So totals calories, totals protein, etc. So now let's save that. Let's come back over here. And now you can see it's calculating our values. So if I add a meal now, let's take a look at what we have, 570 calories. So if I add, let's say steak dinner calories, we'll say, I don't know, 670, protein 60, carbs 20, fat 10, add meal, and now we get a success, and you can see that that got added to all of these, and it's added to RecentMeals. Now the next logical step would be to be able to delete these meals. So let's just close this up for now and then jump back over to our steps. And number 42 is the delete meal functionality. So I actually want to add a function to our storage file. So let's copy this, and this is just the delete meal function to delete it from async storage. So in just source storage meals, we're going to just add this at the bottom here. And just like you would with local storage, you're going to basically just first of all, get them, filter the one out that you don't want. We're just using the filter method, and then just reset it, right? So set item, use the key, and then pass in the filtered meals. So that's that. And then we want to update the meal item component to allow us to delete. So let's copy this. And then we're going to go into our meal item component, and let's just replace this. Okay, and I'll just go over this. Basically, all we're doing is importing delete meal, and then we're just coming down here, and we have a function called handle long press. So basically, the way it'll work is if you just tap it, it's not going to do anything. If you hold on it, a long press, then it'll delete, or it'll actually alert and ask you if you want to delete. Okay, so we're using that alert component, passing in, just saying, are you sure you want to delete? You can specify what you want the buttons to say, so cancel, and then delete, style. Basically, we're just passing in destructive as our style, which will be like a red button or red alert. And then on press is where you put the functionality, and of course, we're going to call our delete meal from the storage file. All right, now we're just calling on delete here, which is going to get passed up, or passed in as a prop. All right, because I want to be able to redirect on delete. So basically what we're going to do next is update the RecentMeals to pass that delete callback. So let's copy this, and this is going to be our RecentMeals. And then we'll just paste that in. So basically all I did here is where we embed the meal item, you can see this was added. So on delete equals a function called on delete. And up here, you can see that on delete is getting passed into RecentMeals. All right. Then we want to pass it up one more time. So right here, we want to, on the index page, where RecentMeals is embedded, we just want to have an on delete and then call load meals. Okay, so basically we're just kind of refreshing when we delete. We're just calling load meals again. I know that we're kind of prop drilling here a little bit, but let's go to index. So app, tabs, index, and then RecentMeals. We're just going to add that on delete. And when that's called, basically when it's deleted, it'll call load meals, which is this right here, which will get the meals from async storage. Okay, so we should be able to test this out. Let's come over here, and I should be able to do a long press by just clicking and holding. So I'm going to do that. And now you can see an alert pops up. Click delete, and there we go. Everything refreshes because we have one single source of truth, which is this meal state. So now the next step is to do the all meals, right? I want to list all meals here because only the latest 5 will show on the home page. And it's going to be very similar to the index or home screen functionality. So number 46, all meals data, I'm going to grab that. And let's go into our app tabs, meals TSX, and let's replace this. And if we take a look, we're doing the same exact thing. We're bringing in get meals from our storage, and we're setting it here. We're calling load meals when the page loads or when the screen loads, and putting it into our piece of state here. And then down here, we're just mapping through that state and outputting a meal item for each one. And we're passing in all our values. We're passing in our on delete because when it's deleted from that page, we also want to call load meals. All right, so let's save that. Let's come back over to our simulator, and there we go. And just to add a test, I just want to make sure we can delete from here as well. Okay, so if I go to all meals and I go and I hold this down, delete, and there we go. Now I also want to have the ability to just wipe them all clean, to clear all. So if we go back to our steps and we look at number 47, I just want to add this simple function to our storage, our meal storage, which is to clear all meals. So if we go to storage meals TS, we're going to paste this in, and all it does is it calls await async remove item and passes in the key. So it clears everything. So we'll save that. Now we need to integrate that into the meals TSX that's in the tabs folder. So that's going to be this block of code here. So we'll grab that and then replace all of that. And basically all we're doing here is bringing in clear all meals and then creating this handler, which calls clear all meals and then load meals. And we're just making it so down here, let's see, where is it? We have this touchable opacity, right? So this button with an on press that calls handle clear all. And we just have a little bit of styling. So clear button, color red, font size 16. So let's go ahead and make sure that's saved and then jump back over here. Let's just refresh all meals. Now we have a clear all button, right? If I click that, then it just clears it all. Okay, it says no meals logged. If I go home, no meals logged. So now we basically have a full, it's not full CRUD because we don't have an update. If you want to add that on your own, you can. It's pretty easy. But this video is getting very long, and there's still a couple other things that I want to show you that I want to add to this. So now what I want to do is a couple things using some of the Expo APIs, some of the Expo packages. And the first one is for haptics, which is when your mobile device vibrates. So I want it to vibrate when a meal is successfully added and when a meal is deleted. So we're going to use the Expo Haptics package for that. So this npx expo install command, we're going to go ahead and run that. So I'll just open up a new terminal, paste that in and run it. And then once that's installed, we just want to import it into the add meal. And all we have to do is this one line. Okay, this haptics.notification async. So let's copy that import and then go into add meal, and we want to just throw this in here at the top. So import that, and then where I want to actually do this is going to be in the handle add meal function, and I want to do it. Let's see. Yeah, right here. Actually, it's AI is already suggesting it. So I'll just hit tab. So I put this notification async right after the alert, the success alert, before we redirect. Whoops, it didn't take. There we go. All right. And then, like I said, I also want to do it when it deletes. So that's going to be in the meal item. And that will reflect both on the home page and the homepage and the all meals because they both use the meal item. So let's go to components, meal item, and then let's import, let's say import all as haptics from Expo Haptics. And then we want to go right here. So after delete meal, but also before on delete. And we're going to call same method, notification async, and haptics notification feedback type dot success. Okay, so that should do it. Now, you can't actually test this on a simulator, but if you're using Expo Go, if you're using a physical device, you can do that. And then obviously once you build it and you have it on your physical Android or iOS device, then it'll work. But let's just make sure that we can still add meals and stuff. So I'll say protein shake and say calories 120, protein 30, 10, 0. Add meal. So right then it should do, you should feel the vibrate. Now, the next thing we're going to do is use the share API. So basically what this allows us to do is share with other apps, right? So it could be social media, it could be just a notes app or reminders or something. So this is actually a React Native API. As you can see here, its share is being brought in from React Native. The rest of the stuff that I'm going to show you are from Expo, but this is from React Native itself. So what we're going to do is create a share button component. We're going to copy this. This is number 50, and I'll go over it after I paste it in. So let's go to components. Let's create a component called share button.tsx, and we'll paste this in. And it's pretty simple. We just bring in share. We're also bringing in our meal type. We're bringing in colors and icons because we're going to have a share icon. And then it's going to take in meals because that's what we're sharing. And we have a handle share handler, which as you can see is being called down here on press for this touchable opacity. And when that's called, it's going to basically just total everything together using reduce. So it's going to add all the calories, protein, carbs, and fat, and it's going to share that here, right? So we're calling share with an uppercase S dot share with a lowercase s. And then whatever you pass in there will be shared to whatever app you choose. And what we're sharing is a message of MacroZone daily summary with all the macros, and then also the number of meals logged. Okay, so that's what we're sharing. So let's save that, and then we're going to go to, we're going to go to the index tab, index page, and I want to put this where we have just the MacroZone title. Actually, I think I have, so I have that right here. So basically I'm going to replace that text with a view that has that text in it, the MacroZone, and then the share button underneath it. And the share button gets the meals passed to it. So let's replace this with that view, and make sure you import view if you don't have it already, and make sure you import share button. All right, so let's save that, and then we're going to go to our simulator, and there it is. So I'm going to click that, and then there's really nothing installed on this simulator. We can test it with reminders. So now you can see it'll actually add it as a reminder. So, and it's formatted nicely. We have calories, protein, carbs, and fat, meals 1 log today. So, I mean, if you had like, let's say Facebook or something like that installed, then you could, share it through that. So that's the share API. Now I want to use the Clipboard API from Expo. So we need to install this package here, Expo Clipboard. So I'm going to copy this, and we're using npx expo install. So let's go ahead and install that. And then what we're going to do is create a copy button component. So we're going to copy this code here under number 51. And then we're going to go to components and create a new copy button.tsx. Paste that in. And this is very similar to how the share works. I'm also bringing in haptics so that when we copy, it'll make the phone vibrate. But yeah, we're bringing in Clipboard from Expo Clipboard. We have a handler here called handle copy, which will run when our touchable opacity is clicked, and that touchable opacity wraps an icon and a copy summary text. All right. And then when that happens, same thing, it's going to use reduce. We could put that into like a utility if we wanted, because it's the same thing we did in share. And then we create the summary here with all the values, the totals. Then we call the clipboard API, so clipboard.setString async, and then pass in the summary. So that's what'll be copied. Then we fire off our haptics, and then we fire off the alert. So very simple. Now the copy button, I want to put that in the index TSX, and I'm going to put it right under MacroGrid. So let's say copy button. Actually, I don't want to do that. I want to do copy button. And yeah, we want to make sure we pass in meals, and then we want to import that. Okay, so save, and then let's check it out. So we got copy summary. I'll click that. It says macro summary copied to clipboard. And we can test that out. I'll just open up a empty text file here and paste, and you can see it's formatted nicely, just like it was in the share app or share API. All right, so that's that. And there's a ton of little packages like this you can install and use. So the next one is for notifications. Now, there is, there's an issue. If you're using Expo Go, it says as of SDK 53, it won't work in Expo Go, but it will work on the simulator. It will work when you build it out for iOS or Android. So this is going to be the Expo notifications package. So let's copy that and install it. And what we're going to do is create a utility that has the functions to schedule a reminder, to request permissions, and to cancel the reminders. So I'm going to copy this right here, this code in number 52, and we're going to create a file in utils notifications ts. So in source, not in the app folder, just right in source, we're going to create utils as a folder, and then we're going to create a file and call that notifications.ts. And we'll paste that in. All right, so bringing in notifications. Here we call set notification handler, and that takes in a function where we can set to show alert, to show banner, show list, play sound, and set badge. So these are different values you have. Now here we have our request permissions. So we have to call this notifications.request permissions async. And then here we have our schedule meal reminders. So this is where you set the time that you want the reminders to fire off. So, and we do this with schedule notification async. That's the method name. And that takes in content, which is what you want to show in your reminder, a title and a body. Here it says macro zone, and don't forget to log your lunch. And then the trigger, we pass in a type, which is going to be daily. Okay, so schedulable trigger input types dot daily, and then the time. So here I'm just putting hour 12. So this is going to fire off at noontime. And then we have another one set here for hour 18. Okay, so that's going to set off for dinner, and it's going to say time to log your dinner. There's no breakfast, but if you wanted to add that, you could. And then we just have a cancel meal reminders where it's going to call this notifications.cancel all scheduled notifications async. So basically we'll have a switch, a toggle. When it's off, it'll call this, and when we turn it on, it'll schedule. Okay, so let's save that, and then we want to use that in a component called reminder toggler. So let's copy this one, and let's go, let's see, we're going to go into components and create a new file called reminder. What did I call it? Just want to make sure it's the same. Reminder toggle. So let's rename and reminder toggle.tsx, and then we're going to paste that in. All right, so basically what we're doing here, we're actually going to save a key in async storage so that it remembers if we actually set it or not. And then we're bringing in those three things from the util, which is the cancel meal reminders, request permissions, and schedule meal reminders. We're just setting a variable of reminders key here, which I'm setting to a string of reminders enabled. Then we have our function with our state, our local state, which is just if it's enabled or not, set to false by default. Okay, and then when we toggle, it's going to check the value, it's going to request permission, and it's going to schedule the meal reminder. That's if it's toggled on. If it's toggled off, it's going to call cancel meal reminders. All right, and it's going to load it as soon as it loads, as soon as the screen loads. All right, and then down here we just have our switch. The value is the local state of enabled. On value change is going to call toggle. And then we also have track color, and we just have bringing in our colors from our global style. All right, so let's save that, and then where we're going to put that is going to be in the index. So tabs, index, and let's put this right below copy button. So we want to add reminder toggle. We don't need to pass meals in or anything, just simply that. Make sure you import it at the top. And then if we check it out, we see meal reminders, and we can shut it off, we can turn it on. Now the reason mine was on right away is because I had already done this and I had to re-record, so it was set to true in the storage. Yours, I believe yours will be off by default. All right, now I can't really test this. I mean, I could, but I don't want to go through that right now. But I'll show you, I actually installed this app on my phone and I've been getting notifications from it. So I'll show you what they look like. Just make sure I have nothing else here that I don't want you guys to see. All right, so if you look at the very top, it might be backwards on the screen, but at the very top, there's two reminders, one to log my dinner and one to log my my lunch. And I've been getting these, daily since I created this a little while ago. But yeah, so that's all set. So we have notifications, we have copy, we have our clipboard, we have a share, we have haptics, and we're using async storage. So this should give you some ideas at least. You know, you should have some ideas on some stuff that you want to create. And of course, using AI, I mean, you can, build more, but I would definitely suggest learning, at least understanding what we've done here before you get into any AI development. But let's close this stuff up. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Now I do want to go over some of the EAS stuff. So we'll do that next. So when it comes to actually testing on a physical device and publishing and submitting to app stores, there's a few ways to do this. The easiest way, in my opinion, is to go through the Expo Application Services, or EAS. So basically, we already connected our project when we installed the EAS CLI, and we ran EAS init, and we added that ID. So that's already created. So now what you can do is run EAS. You don't even need NPX if you installed it globally, and then -- platform, and you can do all iOS or Android. Now, to publish an iOS project, you do need an Apple developer account that's enrolled, which I believe is $99. I paid that and enrolled many years ago, but for some reason it's not coming up as enrolled. So I actually couldn't build for my iPhone. I did get it on my phone through Xcode because you can do that. But if you actually want to publish it, you do need a developer account. And for Android, you don't need to pay anything. You can build it out for Android, and basically it'll give you a file. It should give you a .aab file, which is the file type to submit to the App Store. If you want an APK file, which can be directly installed on your device, you just need to edit your eas.json and add this here, this build preview Android build type APK. So I think that's what I want to do, is just get an APK file. So I'm going to grab that and jump over to, you can see I actually tried my Apple developer account, but it wasn't working. So let me just clear that up. And in EAS.JSON right here, so build build and yeah, so I'm going to just replace that. Wait, is that right? No, get an extra curly brace there. Okay, so I got build and then preview, distribution internal, Android build type, APK, production, auto increment true. So this will allow me to create an APK file. So what I'm going to do now is run this command here, EAS build, platform, Android, and profile is going to be preview. You have preview, you have development, and you have production. So let's try this out. Okay, so upload it to EAS. You can see the logs here if you want. My build's been queued. Now, if I go back to expo.dev, you can actually see my build right here, recent activity, Android. This is the one that's going on now, Android internal distribution build. But before, I ran it as an AAP file, and that's the Android Play Store build. So you can easily just submit to the Play Store, and you can use a command. You can use EAS submit to do that. So Android makes things much easier than Apple does, in my opinion. But yeah, this can take a while, but what I'll end up with is an APK file that I could actually install on a physical device. All right, guys, so this has completed. It took quite a while. It took like 10 minutes or so, and it says install and run the Android build on the emulator. So not only did it create my APK file, but I can actually run it on the emulator. So I'll say yes to that. Okay, so it's successfully downloaded, and now it shows that I have a Pixel 9 emulator. So we'll go ahead and open that. So this is no longer running, yeah, this is going to refresh. This is no longer running, an Expo server, development server. It's an actual APK. And that splash screen that we just saw, you can change that easily. So yeah, here's the application running. Let's go ahead and add a meal. Say test 412, whatever, doesn't really matter. Meal added successfully. There it is. Okay, if I wanted to share it, I could choose, oh, there's no recommended people to share with, sharing text. I haven't used an Android device in a while, so I'm not exactly sure what does what as far as the apps. If I want to copy it, so now it's copied. If I want to enable real meal reminders, allow notifications, all meals, could clear all. Awesome. So this is our actual app running, basically not in production, but it's a production file, right? So in expo.dev, we can click on, let's see. And again, this is the distribution build because I used the preview profile. Earlier I used production, so I do also have that ready. But you can see the logs that went through. Now, if you wanted to, you could set up a workflow as well within Expo, which is basically just CI/CD. You can just push to GitHub, and it'll go ahead and it'll update the app. It'll update the app in production. It will submit it to the App Store or update in the App Store. So you could set that up as well. So Expo makes everything pretty easy. Much easier than it was, years ago. But hopefully this gives you some insight on creating mobile apps with React Native. I would suggest taking what you learned here and applying it to your own projects and see what you can come up with. And in my opinion, if you understand everything in this video, then you can also use AI to assist in development. But that's it, guys. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.